Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm very pleased to have John Mews as my guest today. John is a neurologic music therapist, special needs family and parenting coach, and associate marriage and family therapist. Working with families of children with special needs is something near and dear to his heart, and he has been doing so for the past 15 years. After he completed his bachelor's degree in music therapy, he started his own private practice. Over the years, he has witnessed the amazing power music has to transform lives and relationships for the better. In 2010, he completed his master's degree in marriage and family therapy in order to expand his practice to support the whole family, and in 2013, he moved his practice from Vancouver to Southern California. In addition to working with children, he also supports clients in treatment facilities who struggle with the challenges of addiction, eating disorders, and mental health. In 2016, he completed his advanced training in neurologic music therapy and added this specialty training to his practice to help heal neurologic injury through evidence-based intervention and support clients with speech and language delays, motor control challenges, and more. Welcome, John, and thank you so much for joining me today to talk about the wonderful and unique work that you do with the special needs community.
Thank you so much. I'm just so glad to be here and to talk about music therapy and what I've experienced over the last 15 years.
So please tell me, what is music therapy and what sort of clients does it work well for?
So music therapy is, it's an evidence-based, it's a clinical-based use of music to help accomplish individualized goals. So with the therapeutic relationship between the client and the therapist. It's also run by a credentialed music therapist. So music therapist has to go through a whole regime of training, like a social worker, like an occupational therapist, or marriage and family therapist as well. And so it's also a healthcare profession which uses music as a therapeutic relationship to address physical challenges and needs, emotional challenges, some of the work that I do within mental health, cognitive, as well as social needs of varying individuals.
What is your educational background and your professional experience in working with children with special needs, and do you work with specific types of special needs populations?
Yeah, so in 2001, actually, I began my bachelor training in music therapy. So music therapy basically is, you need 2 years of music training, in-depth music training. And then year 3 and 4 in the bachelor degree, it's a more of an intense focus on music in the brain, music and psychology, the adaptations of music to focus on change and healing with others. So it's a 4-year degree program. And then music therapists in their bachelor degree program have to complete a 1,500-hour internship. And then after the internship, they have a licensure process. So they have to write an exam to be board certified throughout the United States. And, because I'm Canadian as well, I moved here from Canada, they have the very similar same process there as well. Me personally, primarily, I've been working with families of children with special needs, mostly autism, actually. And then when I moved here to California, my marriage and family therapy license didn't transfer, so I had to do my internship all over. And a part of my work throughout my internship, doing my hours for marriage and family therapy, I started doing a lot of work in treatment centers for addiction, mental health, as well as eating disorders. So initially, primarily, my practice was working with families of kids with special needs, but over the last 6 years, it's been kind of divided. I would say probably it's 50-50 right now. Half of my practice works with families with kids with special needs, and half in mental health and addiction treatment facilities.
Can you tell us more about the how and why music therapy is beneficial for children with special needs, and also why choose music therapy over music lessons or a music class?
Okay. So if you just think about it, whenever I do a workshop on music therapy, kind of the first thing that I say in my very open line is we are a walking, talking, breathing, moving instrument. And really, if we can use music in an intentional way, we can really transform our lives. We can change from our breathing to, everything about our life and our internal organs is about vibration and rhythm and music. So I've seen children, well, not even children, I've seen a lot of patients actually over the years really transform through using voice, using rhythm, using drumming techniques to really transform them. And, one of the things that I've seen for many, many years, children, especially children on the autism spectrum, a lot of them have, a very different contact to the world. And so a lot of people and therapists are trying to fit them in this mold, and they have to speak, and they have to do this, and they have to do all these things. And, although all those things are great to accomplish, but, it's a bit of a cliche, but, music is a universal language. And so a lot of times working with children and kiddos on the spectrum, especially with communication challenges, music can be their voice. Music can really help them connect. It can help them reach out. And it can really help them just communicate what's going on. So often, many times, I would do a drumming activity, and we would, or myself personally, I would talk about emotions, and I would talk about I'm feeling frustrated, and this is what it sounds like on the drum. And I would play some erratic rhythm on the drum. And then they would repeat back to me on a drum, not able to communicate it probably a lot of the times, but just being able to communicate through music. So that's just one aspect of working with kids on the spectrum that, music can be an amazing way for them to just be able to communicate effectively.
And it sounds to me like that type of interaction that you're describing with the music isn't something that typically happens in a regular music class or music lessons. So this is a whole different way of using music as a tool to reach that individual and have them work through their issues and communicate. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. What I always say, all music is therapeutic, to one regard, but, we boost it up to a level of us in our training as music therapists and taking it to a different level. So primarily in music classes, and I get this call all the time from parents that will say, oh, I put Johnny in a music class, and, I was really hoping that he would be engaged. And oftentimes what a lot of parents are finding is that the child is disengaged, or a lot of the music teachers can't really, get them to be active in the program because they're not really sure what's going on. And the primary focus of a music class is the music production. It's about, can you play this? Can you perform? And at the end of a music class, it's primarily more focused on the performance aspect. And actually early in my practice, and you might want to put this in the notes, but I wrote a blog that was called Music Therapy is Not Music Lessons. Because a lot of people get really confused, and they're like, so are you going to teach my child how to play the guitar? And I'm like, maybe sometimes, but our primary focus is not about the performance piece, because the performance piece is more about the perfection and playing in time and, singing on the note and singing in tune. And that's really, really not our goal at all. So the primary difference between a music class and the music therapy is more about the performance piece. And music therapists, or also I've got a lot of phone calls from parents that had removed their kids from the music class because they're not able to keep up, or everybody else is playing on the rhythm, and they're probably even getting overstimulated, really. So a lot of the work in what music therapists do is like slow down the tempo and helping them more regulate and just understand that, this is where you're at, and maybe you can't keep up with the rest of the class. And the music therapist is really able to isolate some of those goals individually. And it's not at all based on the performance level. We're not working to have them to be the next Pavarotti. We're, really working on utilizing music to just really help them understand the components of music and how they can regulate. And I'll just give you an example. I'm working with a kiddo right now, and he's having a really, really difficult time regulating. And this is part of also the neurologic music therapy piece as well. And the mom was just telling me, she's like, we've tried everything. He's been in music class. He couldn't keep up. He was even getting more frustrated because all of his friends around him in the class were able to play on the beat, or they were able to, sing in time, and he couldn't do that. And then on top of that, he felt like he couldn't keep up. He was trying to compare himself to the rest of his peers. And then, he was overloaded, and he had a complete meltdown. And so the mom removed him from the class, and she heard about music therapy and therefore neurologic music therapy. And she was like, I want to try this. Like, I don't know much about it, and I want to try it. So in our very first few sessions, we used some drumming techniques to just, use both sides of your body and to activate both sides of the brain. And we did a memory exercise with the bells, and I just wanted to see how many different notes he could memorize in a row. And he got really, really upset. And so I stopped doing the memory exercise, and then I started doing some rhythm activity. We didn't even talk about it. I was like, okay, let's just get out of the drum. And we started drumming, and within 5 minutes, I could see his complete body just relax. And he was sitting in the music, and I just looked at him, I said, how are you? And he's like, I'm okay now. And I was like, wow. I said, what just happened? And he said, I was really, really frustrated. And he said, I was able to get it out on my drum. And I was like, that's great. So then I chatted with the mom, and I just talked about, beyond that, in his mind, he just realized that something happened to my body. I went from a place of complete tension and frustration, and I was able to rhythm and beat on a drum, and now my body's relaxed for some reason. So in his little itty-bitty concept of music therapy, he just realized that drumming really helped, and he feels better. But, then the other bigger piece is music in the brain and how rhythm really has an amazing part in our overall regulation. So that's just an example of, this family trying to have their kiddo in a music class, and it was just not conducive, was not helpful. And it also was, in my opinion, it could be a little bit harmful, because if he's not able to keep up and then he gets a meltdown, and if they're so focused on the performance base and he's not able to keep up based on whatever disability or challenge he has, that can be really frustrating and can be quite harmful for some of the kiddos.
Well, you kind of already covered what my next question was going to be, which was to be a little more specific about what neurologic music therapy is and how it does benefit your clients with special needs, primarily autism. Are there any other examples that you'd like to give, or anything you'd like to add to that?
So I just want to speak to neurologic music therapy piece for a moment. Neurologic music therapy came to the surface, I would say, probably 20 years ago. His name is Dr. Michael Tout. So you might want to look him up. You can Google him. He was a music therapist that connected with a lot of neurologists, and neurologists were quite fascinated with the music component. And one of the things that they were quite fascinated with many, many years ago, they're like, we want to know what actually happens when a patient or a client is engaged with music. And so they tested both passive and active music. So passive music is more listening, and active music is more you're actually engaged, you're playing, you're drumming, or you're playing the piano. And they were like, we see the difference in people, and we understand that music has an effect, but we want to know what happens in the brain. And so many years ago, we always hear, oh, you're the creative type, so, music is in the right part of the brain, right? We've all heard that. So when they finished their testing, and I'm not quite sure what they did actually in their testing, but the PET scans and all of that, in their research, basically what they said verbatim, they said the entire brain lit up like a Christmas tree.
Wow.
And they were like, this is fascinating, because what we thought, or what we one time thought, that music was processed in just the right hemisphere because of the creative type, now we know for fact that music is processed in every entire part of the brain, from front to back, left to right. And so the neurologists were like, this totally makes sense, that how we can have people like Gabby Gifford. Remember Gabby Gifford, the congresswoman? Right,
absolutely.
that got shot.
Yep.
So they're like, this totally makes sense why people like Gabby Gifford can sing a song, but she can't actually speak words. And they're like, this is how all this stuff happens, because if there's an injury in the brain, regardless of whatever it is, it could be traumatic brain injury, it could be Parkinson's disease, it could be, anything that's challenging in the neural system. If there's an injury, if we can use music and practice music enough, and because of now the new research on mirror neurons, and you can refire, right? You can basically build a new neural pathway. And they're like, with all this new research, if music is processed in the entire brain, we can use music to help remap around the injury. And this is what happened to Gabby Gifford. Actually, I trained with the neurologic music therapist that worked with Gabby Gifford every day. And when I chatted with her, she was like, yeah, I use simple songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I just filled in like things of everyday life, like this is a glass. And I substituted the words from Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star because that was already mapped in her brain, that was in her memory. And because of music being processed in the entire area and practicing, and in neurologic music therapy, we call it entrainment. So entrainment is you keep practicing it over and over and over and over. And then once you practice over and over and over and over, it actually builds a new neural pathway. And so she was able to regain her speech through neurologic music therapy. Now, what was really frustrating to us as a music therapy profession, of course, the media took a hold of this because this was a congresswoman, and they're like, this lady was injured, and we had this beautiful opportunity to advocate and to educate about neurologic music therapy and how music can really, do beautiful things in the brain, and we can rewire and make a neural pathway. So instead of calling it what it really was, the media called it sing therapy, which is not even an accredited profession. So we were quite deflated, and we're like, are you serious? This is an opportunity to really talk about the science and what this really is. So neurologic music therapy gave birth between these neurologists and Dr. Michael Tout that really worked hard together to really study and research music and techniques and interventions, from rhythm interventions. They have singing, vocal interventions as well. And so they worked years and years and tirelessly focusing on the research part. And they have 21 interventions in the music therapy program, and all 21 interventions are evidence research, like heavily backed in research that this really helps. And actually, one of the top treatments right now for Parkinson's is neurologic music therapy.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. And while you were talking, I was just thinking about so many examples just flying through my brain about a movie that was very, very popular a few years ago called The King's Speech, which is a movie about the former King of England, the father of Queen Elizabeth, who had a speech impediment. And a large portion of that film talks about the therapist who worked with him to help him get through his speeches and so forth, and would actually have him sing a portion of his speech or think about singing it, which would help him get through that speech impediment. And also the amazing effects that music has on people who are on the spectrum, and specifically, for example, people with autism. One of the recent winners of the America's Got Talent show here in the United States, Cody Lee, a young man with autism who is also blind, who walked out on the stage, sat down at the piano, and blew everybody's mind in terms of what he was able to do and the songs he could play and how he sang. It was just incredible. Absolutely. So as you were talking, all these things were going through my mind, and I was thinking, yeah, absolutely right, absolutely true.
Yeah, this is the performance-based piece, and I think a lot of families get a little misconstrued sometimes by that because they see mainstream media, and yes, I validate this is beautiful, and this is a gentleman that, has lived with autism and blind and the amazing musical abilities that he has, but sometimes parents get a little misconstrued by that, and they're like, oh, because my son has autism, and can you teach him how to play the piano, and, maybe he'll be on America's Next Top Model, or America's...
Well, no, not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that, but it does. But it certainly does speak to the healing effects, of music.
Yes. And one of the things that, I've been reading a lot about, and a lot of the research, and, autism is actually categorized as a neurologic challenge, right? As a neurologic disability. And one of the things that I find very, very interesting in our society, in our culture, is we're starting autism on a behavioral approach. So, and I'm not knocking ABA. I think ABA is amazing, and I think it's super, super important. But that's kind of the system that began a few years ago, because if you just think about it, if we have an injury somewhere in our brain, it's going to show up in our behaviors. We're going to have tics. We're going to have, stuttering. We're going to have, irritation or mood challenges. And if we have an injury in our brain, it shows up in our behaviors. So, they did a lot of research, and there's tons of money that went into researching ABA therapy. And I think it's absolutely amazing. But right now, this is kind of the first level of defense in therapy, is to go to ABA first. And for me, I'm thinking, well, if we can actually work on the neurologic piece first and then see what happens to the behavior, I think that is the new place of therapy right now for our kiddos with autism. Because a lot of these kiddos, they're having challenges with the wiring in their brain and the firing. And so a lot of research, what it's been showing is that the corpus callosum, so that little tiny piece that attaches both hemispheres of her brain, they've been seeing that either the firing between two sides of the brain has been way too fast, or else they've been showing that the firing between two sides of the brain has been super, super slow in kiddos with autism. And so if you just think about music and the basis of music and utilizing rhythm and using both sides of your body, like this kiddo that I used prior, an example, I had him drumming for just 5 minutes, and he was using both sides of his brain, which therefore activated both hemispheres, and it caused him to regulate. And the mom was like, he was just so upset. And I'm like, we didn't do a behavioral approach. This was not behavioral. It showed up, the symptomology showed up as a behavior, but it was maybe, I don't know, I didn't have him hooked up to all kinds of machines and to kind of see what was going on in his brain. But this is the thing with a lot of kiddos with autism. It's more about the brain and the firing and the neural impulses. And if we can just add music to that, I'm pretty sure that the behaviors would be, I'd say, 60% less. And of course, we still need our ABA therapist. But I would love to see it as a neurologic approach first, rather than a behavioral approach. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of feedback from ABA therapists and other people that are like, yes, let's do 40 hours of ABA. But, I've seen a lot of kiddos that have done 40 hours of ABA, and then they sat with a drum for like 30 minutes, and they were cool as a cucumber. And they're like, I'm fine. I'm regulated, or I was able to move both parts of my body, and now I'm able to sit and focus. Like, I've seen a ton of kids that have been referred to me over the years. Actually, a new one, this young girl, she's only 7 years old. We just did an assessment last week, and the mom even pulled her out of school because the teacher was like, I don't know what to do with her. She won't sit down. She won't attend. Like, we can't do anything with her. So the mom had to quit her job, and she started homeschooling this young, beautiful woman. And she was like, hey, I just want you to come to my home, and if nothing else, I just want her to enjoy music. And I was like, well, you know, what is it you really want to work on? And why did she leave school? And she said she's not able to attend. Like, her attention span is, I've only seen my daughter sit and attend to something for like 3 minutes. So I said, okay, I will come and do an assessment, and I'll bring an array of instruments, and we'll just kind of see what you know, she's drawn to, and I can create a program to help with that, but other things. And I brought in an array of instruments. I put them all over the floor, and she chose the xylophone. And she sat for 32 minutes and did not move, and played that xylophone for 32 minutes. And the mom was in the kitchen. She was watching, and I could see her with tears in her eyes, and she's like, I've never seen this. I've never seen this. Like, how is this happening? Like, I've never seen my daughter sit and be engaged in something for longer than 3 minutes. Like, how is this happening? I'm like, this is the beauty of music, really, you know, probably for the first time in a long time as well. She's getting feedback as well as a reinforcer. It's like, I'm creating this. I'm creating this beautiful music, and this sounds amazing, and this is part of me, right? Rather than I'm in a school and I have to sit and I'm no good and I can't do this. And, you know, so that's a large part of the reward system as well in our music sessions is the feedback that a lot of our kiddos get. They're like, oh, I'm creating this and I have control of this. And, you know, this feels good and this sounds nice to me. So the engagement piece is huge, very huge for attention span as well.
Well, I think you made some very interesting and very valid points, John. I really do.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to ask, is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered? And what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners to remember from our conversation?
I think the other thing that I actually want to add is a program that we've been running is a program that I actually created in Canada, and I'm bringing it here, and I want more families to know about it. Because we don't just work with kiddos. We work with the entire age range. And I know a lot of families are really struggling with after school. And they're like, you know, my child got speech therapy and occupational therapy and tons of therapies and tons of support. And one of the biggest concerns right now is what happens to my child when they leave school. What are we going to do? There's not many programs. So we created a program in Canada. It actually has a documentary, so that's on my website as well. And I call it the Glee Choir because at that time, the Glee show was quite popular. Everybody knew about it. But I wanted to create a program for adults where they can come together. And again, it's a music therapy program, but, you know, it's kind of, as an outsider, it looks more like a choir. So I keep it to like a size of maybe 10 people because I want to keep the music therapy elements into that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because we just went back to, we were talking about King's speech and, you know, using music and rhythm to help the fluidity of speech. So in this program, each of these adults come with their favorite songs, and we learn them, and we perform them, actually, for their families and for the community. So a large part of what we do in that is basically social skills. This is a social skills music therapy program. They get to learn how to ask for help. They get to learn how to be together, conflict resolution. I don't like that song. You know, we just had an argument last week in one of the Glee choirs, and they're like, I hate Katy Perry. And this girl was like, I love Katy Perry, and I want to sing her song. And so we just utilize the space in our music program to just really talk about, well, you know, when you don't like something and somebody else does, how do we treat other people? So largely it's a social skills program. But then they were having a lot of trouble with one of the songs, which had a lot of syncopation. It's actually a Beatles song, Penny Lane. And so one gentleman requested Penny Lane, and the entire verse was full of syncopation. They were having such a difficult time with the rhythm. So I played it on the piano, and we sang it. And a lot of the parents were, they're observing and watching. And I just said to them, I said, watch this. So I got out a drum for every single one of them. And I went through the entire lyrics, and I said, okay, I want you to play it on the drum. So we drummed it out, and we used all of the syllables of every single word as if it were the drum. And so they just played it into the drum. And we did it for maybe 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, every single one of them had the words and all the syncopation correct in the song.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right? And so that's a testament of this neurologic piece. Is like if we can use music and rhythm and, how it's wired in our brain and the beautiful stuff that music does, and it's processed in the entire brain. I always tell people when I do workshops as well, I'm like, just think back when we were little kids. How did we learn the alphabet? We sang it. And now we have the evidence to show that, yeah, we sang it because music is processed in the entire brain. So why not use music in math? Why not use music in motor planning, which is huge now for clients with Parkinson's, using music to help their gait and motor planning. And if I'm trying to reach for something and how challenging that is, and if we do a little rhythm exercise, I can reach for things and I can walk and I can move a lot smoother. So that's just, again, another example of what I wanted to point out about using music and rhythm. And they just had that syncopation down. And I was like, wow, isn't this amazing? Like 4 minutes ago, just 5 minutes ago, you guys were all over the map, could not get the words, and now you just drummed it, and it's in your body, and you will remember it forever. And the parents were like, this is like magic. I'm like, not really. This is not magic. I'm like, We've had music for centuries. Music has been healing people and transforming people for centuries. And I'm like, right now, we just have the science to really prove it. And this is actually what happens in our brain when we are engaged in music. We can do amazing things. And I love it. I tell people, I'm like, I've been doing this for 15 years, and still, truly, every day I wake up and I still say, I love what I do. I get to see very challenging clients that's been turned down by this profession or that one saying, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this. And we pull out a drum or we sing something or whatever the intervention is, and they do it. And I was like, yes, yes, I love this.
Well, now I do have a question for you. What if someone is out of the area? Maybe they're in a different part of the state than where you are. Maybe they're in a different state. Is this something that you can advise people or work with people on remotely? Does that work at all?
So this is a big challenge, right, for a lot of people living elsewhere in our country, through Canada as well, where, I don't live near a music therapist, or I had to drive 2 hours to see the nearest music therapist. I always avail myself to parents as a consult and be like, okay, well, is there anything that I can help you with, that you can do some music interventions at home? So I always avail myself for questions. But the first thing I would do with them is, to try and see, is there a nearest music therapist? And, there's the American Music Therapy Association, and they have a whole list of music therapists all across the country. So if there's any parents that are questioning or want to know more about music therapy or looking for a music therapist in their area, that's probably one of the first go-to places, is the American Music Therapy Association. And to go to their website, and you can just put in any region and location and find your nearest music therapist.
So how can our listeners reach you if they have questions or if they want to know more?
So they can reach me. I'm available by phone or by email or my website. My phone number is 818-877-6797. And my email and my website. So I'll give my website because you can contact me right through my website. But my website is musicmoves.com. Now, because my last name is Mews, M-E-W-S, I really feel like God gave me the perfect name. So if you just attach an I, the letter I, and the letter C to my last name, it says music. So that's my business name. It's not the typical M-O. It's not the M-U-S-I-C music, but it's M-E-W-S, which is my last name, Mews, with the letter I and the letter C, and then the word moves. Musicmoves.com is my website. So you can reach me there. You can also find a lot of blogs. I write a lot of blogs about music, music therapy, different interventions. I also write some songs as well for therapists and for families, even for teachers that they can use different songs and for different goals of kids as well. You'll find that on my website.
Well, thank you so much, John, for your time and the terrific information that you've shared with us today.
Well, you're so welcome, and I also, just want to say thank you as well, because I know when I first met you, I know you're a mom that has experience in all of this as well, and, a large part of my push to also become a marriage and family therapist is I really wanted to support the entire family, not just Johnny on the spectrum, but I wanted to really help support mom and dad and the siblings, because autism and special needs really affects the entire family. And I just love meeting parents like yourself that takes a challenging situation and makes a difference in the world. And that's one of the things that really impressed me when I first met you. And I'm like, just thank you so much for what you do, because you create this platform for parents out there that might have just got this recent diagnosis and is completely lost, and I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. I'm hearing all these things about try this and try that, and I just really want to say I appreciate you, and I think what you're doing is amazing because of the experience that you've had. So thank you for what you're doing and creating this platform for parents.
Oh, John, I really appreciate those kind words, much, much more than you know.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
And I also want to thank our listeners for spending a part of their day with us. I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.